Friday the 13th is a date that no matter where you are, you will be aware of it if you live in the West. Whether you watch a marathon of Friday the 13th movies, watch some other scary movies, or people at school, work, or online talk about it, there's no escaping this interesting cursed number and calendar occurrence. Why do we make such a big deal out of it though? Is it really unlucky? In order to understand, we gotta talk about the number itself, then the day, then how they combine to give us the social phobia that is Friday the 13th. Let's start with the fear of the number 13, known as triskaidekaphobia. Why be afraid of a simple number? Well, 13 seems to contrast greatly with 12, which is often seen as the perfect number, be it the gods of Olympus, the months of the year, the numbers on a clock, the inches on a ruler, 12 tribes of Israel, 12 apostles, 12 days of Christmas, and even 12 zodiac signs. Well, you get the point. It has a wholesome feel of completeness to it. We're very familiar with it. And 13 is not familiar. And in the psychological literature, we tend to favor familiar things and attribute negative attributes with the unfamiliar. Negative experiences are remembered and noted in your brain with a veracity. So when anything goes wrong in conjunction with 13, people will tend to remember it a lot. It's also growing up with adults with phobias and learning to infer connections that don't exist that also contributes to it. How about historically? Opinions vary, but many associate the phobia to the Last Supper, where there were 13 guests total if you include Jesus in the number. According to tradition, Judas was the 13th guest to arrive, and also the one who betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, ultimately leading to his painful Roman execution. It was considered unlucky by the Christian church for a very long time to have 13 guests as a result. That one might even be courting death in some circles. Still, others trace it back to Loki. No, not the Marvel version, the real mythological version. Apparently, he showed up at a party at Valhalla, uninvited, and was the 13th guest. He did his normal shenanigans and tricked the blind god Hodor into killing his brother Baldur with a mistletoe-tipped arrow. Baldur was the favored son of Odin and his wife Queen Frigg. The earth apparently darkened, and his death began the fall of the gods and ushered in Ragnarok. Now, incidentally, Frigg is where we get Friday from, because it literally means Day of Frigg, which was okay until Christianity made its way into Norse culture and turned her into a witch living in the mountains and plotting her evil deeds every Friday. Which leads us directly to the Friday component. What's so bad about Fridays? Well, Jesus was crucified on a Friday, of course. But something less folks know about is the fall of the Knights Templar. They were a monastic military order that had quickly become one of the richest and most influential groups of the Middle Ages because of big-time donations from the European royalty, eager to gain their favor. By the turn of the 14th century, the Templars had established a system of churches and banks and castles throughout Western Europe. Of course, as you can guess, that led to their demise, a demise orchestrated by a greedy, cash-strapped King Philip IV of France. In October, on Friday the 13th, 1307, he had over 600 Templars charged with false crimes and had them tortured, imprisoned, and burned at the stake. The trials lasted years and culminated in the spring of 1314 when Grand Master Millier and several other Templars were burned at the stake in Paris. Millier cursed Pope Clement and also King Philip, telling them they would die within the year. The Pope died 33 days later, and the King died 7 months later of a massive stroke. Adding to the momentum, a few famous authors like Chaucer made mention of his character's mischance happening on a Friday. Another author, Robert Greene, wrote a pamphlet in 1592 that made mention that Friday was fierce. These just reinforce the growing idea of Friday being somehow unlucky or bad. Now, a bigger thing. In addition to that, it just so happened that Friday was also the day the hangman did his work in Britain and the United States, with the day literally being called Hangman's Day. The superstition around the number and the date didn't truly become one and cement itself into the cultural psyche until the 19th century with the Victorian era. Victorians had many superstitions around omens of death. Cemeteries, clocks, dreams, winged creatures, mirrors, salt, evil animals, lucky tokens, umbrellas, ladders, and cracks. And Friday the 13th became one more superstition, shared from one generation to the next. Sailors particularly had preferences regarding the date and number itself. Now, a club was started in the late 19th century to dispel these superstitions surrounding the number 13 and other Victorian superstitions, and they called it, as you might guess, the 13 Club. They would meet on the 13th of every month. They had 13 people eating a 13-course meal at the table, and they would begin their meetings by passing under a ladder. It only moderately helped slow the social phobia, but as you can tell, not much has changed in the public mind over the day. Though there is no statistical proof to back up anything evil or unlucky about the number, these thoughts and phobias still persist and are not contained only to the West. Like, the idea of an unlucky number or day can be found in almost every culture around the world. In many Spanish-speaking countries, and in Greece, for example, the unlucky date is often Tuesday the 13th. In Italy, it's Friday the 17th. And in Japan, the number 9 is considered unlucky as well. The fear of Friday the 13th affects about 17 to 21 million people a year in the US alone. About 800 billion is lost annually by this fear in the form of missed work, scheduling weddings, events, and travel all around the date to avoid it. So how about you? How do you feel about Friday the 13th? Let us know in the comments below, and happy Friday the 13th to you.